Hello and welcome to RIPTIDE Afterparty, the party where everyone is welcome. It's a brand new year. We've all got 2020 vision, I guess. I can get away with jokes like that because there's no one here joining me this episode. Otherwise, I probably would have got a punch to somewhere unmentionable. But the fact is, it's just me for this one. And it's a bit of a unique episode because at the time of recording, approximately a week ago, Jushin Liger, a Japanese legendary wrestler, retired. He was a big part of my getting into wrestling as a fan, and so I wanted to do a little tribute to him. And the more I thought about him, the more it led to me thinking about RIPTIDE. And so I'm going to tie these two things together later in the episode. But just for right now, first thing we have to get out of the way is RIPTIDE news. Speaking of Japan, funnily enough, Chris Brooks, a RIPTIDE regular, a man who was on the very first RIPTIDE Beers and Bands and Wrestling show, is moving to Japan for 2020. He's going to give his career a whole new challenge. He's going to go over there, see how he gets on with the DDT universe. He's already been over for excursions and done very well, but he wants to give it his all and give it some time over there. So, obviously means we're not going to be seeing him at RIPTIDE in 2020. I know that will upset some fans, but also it just means there's another spot for other people to get involved in. And it means when Brooks does eventually return to England, of course, it feels like a bigger deal. Sometimes you have to miss something before you can learn to love it again. So I just wanted to say, as someone who's enjoyed his work, but also thinks he's just a nice guy in the times I've met him, thumbs up. Hope it goes well for you, Chris. Next piece of RIPTIDE news. James Musselwhite, famed wrestling photographer, recently released a Cara Noir collaboration book. You can buy it on James's website, which is portraitofawrestler.com. There was only 50 of these printed, so it's quite exclusive, and a lot of them did sell on pre-sale. There's still a few on his website, so you can still get one if you want. The reason I'm promoting this is not just because it's a lovely photographic book of Cara Noir through 2019, which of course Cara features quite prominently at RIPTIDE, so there's going to be several photos from there. It's also because one of the unknown extras that came with it, apparently, was a whole little photo book dedicated to the 2019 RIPTIDE Rumble event. I don't actually have this set, so I can't say anything more than that, but I know it's out there. I bet if you're a fan of the Rumble and you wanted that memento, or if you're a fan of Cara Noir and you just wanted a memento, it could be a lovely little book to get a hold of. And speaking of cross-promotion, again, at the time I'm recording, RIPTIDE have a special collaboration coming out with WrestleCrate, the monthly subscription service where you can sign up for different tiers, and depending on that, you get a different crate every month. Memorabilia, weird little quirky toys, you always get a t-shirt, maybe 2 t-shirts, things like that. Apparently there is some sort of Cara Noir RIPTIDE collaboration in the January box. Now, by the time this podcast is out, you may have already missed out on the box and you won't be able to subscribe and get the January one. But they do have as part of the website for WrestleCrate, you can order any sort of overflow of individual items they still have stock of. So if you're interested in it, I would say check out the website. Maybe they'll have some in stock. I guess that's really it for the news, because this episode is very much dedicated to Jushin Liger. One of the reasons I want to focus on Jushin Liger is not just because I'm a fan and he's retired, which of course is the initial starting point for me recording this, but it's because very recently I had some friends around. We were playing Dungeons & Dragons because we're super cool like that, and someone asked me what was the little action figure on our bookshelf, and it's Jushin Liger, and so I started explaining to him and saying how he just retired, and in doing so I was saying what I like about him, and I basically broke his wrestling appeal, I suppose, down to about 5 key elements. And explaining who he is and what I enjoy about his work and his performance, I started thinking, sort of in the back of my head, how that ties into the wrestling industry as a whole, but in particular, sort of certain performers who are regulars at the RIPTIDE events. And it's just the way my brain networked these. I just thought I'd go into it a little bit. Because what's great of one person, of course, can be great for a whole industry. So just to, I guess, sort of preface what I'm talking about is, you may be listening to this, you may not know Jushin Liger. You may know the mask he wears. You may have heard the name. You may not know him, and there's no, he's a legendary Japanese wrestler, but that doesn't mean fans of British independent wrestling have to know who he is. I'm not a gatekeeper. Everyone learns about something for the first time, so I'm just going to lay out a little bit more about him. This isn't comprehensive, because I'm just trying to do it as an intro, but Jushin Liger essentially wanted to be a wrestler in New Japan Pro Wrestling, which was the sort of predominant organisation at the time over in Japan. He had some tryouts, and was basically told he wasn't big enough and it wasn't going to work. But Liger didn't want to give up on his dream, so he actually decided to travel the world, build up his skill set, see if there was some other way to get his foot in the wrestling industry. And amongst the countries he worked at was Canada and Stampede, but also he was in England, where he was booked as Fly-In Fuji Yamada, and he worked this gimmick for All Star Wrestling, who is still going today. I just think it's great that Liger back in the day was an indie wrestler travelling the world building up his craft. And this is before he's famous. Like I say, he doesn't even have the Liger name. And it's during these world travels that Liger ends up in Mexico. Not only is it a great place to learn more about a different world style and sort of incorporate into himself, but it's whilst he's there he gets spotted by some New Japan talent reps. And they actually end up offering him a chance to go back to Japan with them. So in a roundabout way, it actually worked out well for his career. He ends up where he wanted to be in the first place. But he's done it through travelling the world and gaining all these skills that he can combine from different sort of regions. So he goes to work for New Japan. Whilst he's there, there's an anime creator called Go Nagai, and I do apologise if I've mispronounced that. I've only ever seen it written down. But he creates a character called Jushin Liger. And Jushin Liger is kind of this half lion, half tiger, hence Liger. He's a character and he's going to be in a serialised anime series. And New Japan licensed the character, and thus Jushin Liger is born. And as both the anime series and the wrestler sort of evolve over time, he becomes Jushin Thunder Liger. So once the Liger character is complete, and he's gone through a few different costumes, I think the most famous version of him is in a white and red bodysuit with a red mask. Now this is the Liger that I grew up with, and this is the Liger I fell in love with when I had a VHS tape of Super Brawl 2. And Super Brawl 2 was a WCW show from 1992. At the time, really, when I was a kid, the only way you got to see American wrestling was on cassette tapes, unless you had Sky, which I did not have. So I was relying on whatever I could find in VHS stores, yes, they used to have those, or what you could find at car boot sales, or you could borrow off friends or whatever, and somehow I did end up with Super Brawl 2. And on it, there's a very famous match with Flying Brian Pillman against Jushin Liger, and it's for the first introduction of a light heavyweight belt in WCW. And they go on to have a real barnstormer of a match, and it really sort of turned people's heads. And it's in this sort of era with Pillman. I'm starting to see moves which I hadn't seen done before. So he's got a rolling kick. He's got like a jump to the outside where he runs along the turnbuckle and does a somersault onto his opponents on the outside. I had seen Mick Foley doing sort of an elbow drop to the outside, but this seemed reckless in a different way, I suppose. And plus you've got moves like the shooting star press, which Liger actually invented, and it's a really incredible move to be seeing when you're a kid. So that really gets his sort of gets him noticed in America, and certainly gets me noticing him as a kid and sort of trying to find more tapes of him. He's back and forth with WCW and Japan because they have a working relationship. But whilst he's back in New Japan in 1996, Liger actually got diagnosed with a brain tumour. Now, obviously, a brain tumour is incredibly serious, and it was looking like he would have to retire, but also like his life was in jeopardy. But he had an operation to remove it, and in less than a year, he was back wrestling again. I mean, that's insane. But because of that, he was told he had to put his body under less wear and tear, less sort of things that could damage his health. So he's just completely changed his ring style. But it works. He still wrestled up till 2020. So, him changing style didn't seem to impede on him. It just gave him more variety and more showmanship in different areas. He also ended up having an MMA fight in Pancrase, which is... I won't go into the history of Pancrase, but it's an unusual thing to do. He still did it with a mask on. Didn't work out great for him, to be fair. But, it's another tick in the box of what a career. As I mentioned earlier, because Liger had travelled around the British scene with All Star and become befriended Regal, he even ended up with a WWE NXT match in Brooklyn. And I think it says a lot about the respect he's got on the wrestling scene as a whole, that a New Japan employee was able to go and do a WWE event when normally they do not have any sort of crossover. So all of that is just a quick overview. I just wanted to, stress that he is a character based on an anime, at least visually. Obviously, the man behind the mask was a wrestler in his own right. He was a high flyer and an innovative one at that. He then changed his style to become a ground-based power wrestler in a smaller division, showing that size doesn't have to hold you back. You can be a smaller wrestler without having to rely on being a high flyer. There are other ways you can have that career. And finally, just the idea that in his early days he travelled the world, sort of building up his skill sets across Canada and England and Mexico, but also in his later years, that he was that respected and successful, he was able to travel again. I mean, he's wrestled in Ring of Honor, TNA, PWG, WWE. He is a world-travelled wrestler. And all of that combined is a quick overview of Jushin Liger. Now, all of that is well and good. I'm just trying to explain who he is really quickly in case you don't know. But how does that tie into RIPTIDE Wrestling? Well, it's basically because when I think of Liger, I think of ... And this is what I was explaining to my friend over our D&D game. So I've come up with these 5 headings, and I kind of want to spin off on each one. So the first is, when I think of Liger, I think of masks. He infamously wrestles in his mask. There's a few times he has performed without the mask, but he's always had makeup on instead. When he did this MMA fight, he wore a version of the mask. What I find fascinating about wrestlers with masks is it adds so much element of mystery. And if I can, I would say go back to episode 1 of this podcast, because I interviewed Kid Lycos about this, and he gives a really interesting perspective on masks and the freedom it gives performers. What masks add and how it applies to wrestlers in Riptide is it adds a sort of a blank canvas for the audience to look at and feed back on themselves on what they're seeing. So if we look at Cara Noir, the entrance, he has a mask made of mirrors. I mean, that's a very literal example, I suppose, of what I've just said. You're seeing yourselves reflected back on him as he enters the ring. But it's not just that. It's that he is beyond your expectations. He is his own creature. Another example, if you look at Santos from the Anti-Fun Police, why does he need a mask? I mean, okay, he's kind of a luchador in some respects, but it's not like an obvious thing. It's not the character of I'm a police officer doesn't need a mask. It doesn't really make sense as much as the Anti-Fun Police do make sense in the context of wrestling. But it completes the look. Like, if you really stop and think about this, imagine Santos without a mask, right? But it wouldn't be the same. Like, imagine him right now in a ring, all the same Anti-Fun Police gear, but no mask. It would just lack that sort of... It would lack that fun element, because Santos' character is almost like a child dressing up like a superhero. That mask, it really adds that little missing ingredient X, which adds to the whole character. That's something that Liger's had. I was blown away seeing him as a kid, not just because he was a high flyer and it was exciting. I couldn't work out how he's wrestling in the mask, because I thought he's got massive protruding horns coming out the mask. I thought they were hardened plastic, like acrylic or something. And I was thinking, wow, how does he roll without them snapping? Of course they're not, they're just, foam inside stitching. But I was a kid, and kids are idiots. But you shouldn't forget, it's those little things that draw you in. How does he wrestle in a mask? Why does he wrestle in a mask? It's just things like that. So, so when I think of Liger, I think of masks. And when I think of masks and Riptide, I think of Santos and Lycos and Cara Noir. And I'm going to focus on Noir again, because the second one of these is when I think of Liger, I think of conveying character through mime. Another thing with Liger is the only thing on display when he wrestles is his hands. He's in a full bodysuit, he's got the mask on, but it means there's no sort of human element to see visually, really. I suppose the hair a bit, but it's really the hands. So what does he do? He gets everything across in big gestures. Everything is pantomime, essentially, in terms of movement. But it's brilliant. Watch that Tyler Breeze match in NXT. He knows how to play it up for the cameras. Watch a match he had with Samoa Joe in TNA. I believe that one's on YouTube for free. When he's in pain, everything is an over-the-top gesture so you can see it. But it feels right. When he's attacking, he's all fired up and his body language reflects that. The power of mime is really the most important part of wrestling in a sense, because you need to physically convey what you're doing to an audience who can't really hear you. Just a few people that really spring to mind for this. Obviously, Cara Noir, I've just mentioned him. His whole character is a silent performer, so he's perfect for this. But there's others. There's Sue Young. Of course, she's been on a few shows now. She gets across this sort of supernatural character. Again, doesn't really talk. You're having to work out everything about her from the body language, from every stiff movement she's got, every bit of blood that she lets dribble down her chin rather than stopping it. It all works to get across that she's otherworldly. It doesn't have to be an over-the-top character. What about someone like Paul Robinson? Watch the body language. He comes out like an angry pit bull. We've all seen people in pubs who act the big man. And in Robbo's case, it's very believable because he's so terrifying. But the actual stances he takes, or the way his sort of chest is out, his shoulders are back, his arms are out, to make himself seem like a big terrifying animal, it works. And that's the power of physical performance. Once again, someone like Liger, he has to do that more than many wrestlers of his era, because there's no human element to connect to. You can't see his eyes, you can't see his mouth, you can only see the body. And one more part about the body language, when I talk about mime and body language, conveying yourself through it, a massive part of wrestling is selling, is conveying to the audience how much pain or danger you're in. One of the best in the world for that right now, in my opinion, is the OJMO, another Riptide performer. But watch OJMO when he's been thrown around the ring, or how he lands. It's a beautiful thing to watch. And just as a weird little fun note, really, it's quite interesting that Liger's last ever UK match was teaming up with the OJMO. I just think that's a really nice little twist on what I'm talking about, really. Now, don't get me wrong, some of these people do engage with the crowd and talk, and, I'm not saying it's all about silence, but I'm just saying if you cover your ears and watch them, they're getting everything about their characters across, so that even if you're way at the back, You've just walked in the arena. Within 10 seconds, you've got an idea of the sort of character they are. And it's a real talent, and it's the key to any wrestler's success in many respects. And that's something that Liger does exceptionally well, and all those... And every wrestler does it, but just the 4 I've thrown out are just sort of great examples of it. Of course, when I think of Liger, I think of high flying. There's been amazing high flyers who have come through Riptide. Even just as one-offs, we've had Pac, Shane Strickland, repeat performers, Jordan Devlin, Will Ospreay, Kyle Fletcher, TK Cooper. Tell me it hasn't blown your mind watching TK do his omelette du fromage or his Spanish fly off the top rope, or watching Pac pull off a red arrow. These are crazy moves which are stunning to watch in person. And whenever I watch them, although they're now technically more impressive, watching something like a red arrow, when I watch it, I'm still taken back to seeing Liger as a kid and seeing that first shooting star press and thinking, how did he do that? How do you jump forward whilst flipping backwards and landing perfectly balanced? And it takes so much talent. And so it's really telling that Liger has probably influenced people that he's hung around long enough to wrestle. It wouldn't shock me one bit if Will Ospreay has said to him, "You're an influence, thank you very much." Now, I'm totally speculating on that, but it really wouldn't shock me one bit if it had happened. So there's 2 more things that I just wanted to go into with when I think of Liger. And one of them is, when I think of Liger, I think of a really odd theme song. A sort of really fun, upbeat number you wouldn't associate in the world of physical wrestling, particularly not in the 80s and 90s when it's big, muscular men, or the 90s, the Attitude Era. What was consistent? Jushin Liger's song, which was, funnily enough, it was from the anime show that the character's origins lie in. Check it out. Just type in Jushin Liger theme to YouTube. I think it's called Ikare no Jushin Liger. Again, sorry if I've mangled that. I don't speak Japanese. But it's this sort of upbeat synth 80s pop number from a kid's show. And it just begins with the before it kicks in. And it's brilliant because every audience who know who he is are waiting for that because it's their little cue. It's like when Austin's glass breaks. You got those few seconds to go, "Oh, I know who's coming out, and I'm going to get up and cheer." In fact, we had over the tag team tournament weekend in Riptide, we had guest ring announcer Matt Richards. Matt Richards has used that theme tune to come out on a podcast show from the hardest part of the ring. They did a live show, and Matt Richards came out to that theme song. So it's an iconic theme song amongst fans of Liger. But also, it's just fantastic because you can only associate it with him. Not just because it's literally from the Jushin Liger anime show, but because it wouldn't fit any other character. Who does that make me think of in Riptide? I hate to say it, but it's Curtis Chapman. Old Mad Kurt himself. When you hear his music, you know it's his, and it wouldn't suit any other character. And it gets stuck in your head, and you know it's him, and you know to react. You know instantly, oh no, it's this prick, I've got to boo him now. But the key thing is, in both Liger and Chapman's cases, they just sound unique. You know, it's something you need to do in wrestling to stand out. There's so much competition. How many wrestlers need to come out to new metal songs or rap songs? Not because they're bad, sometimes it perfectly suits the character. But there's always a risk you'll blend in if other people are doing the same. Sometimes it's good to pick a genre which no one else is using. I suppose another example is Spike Trevay. Again, the music perfectly suits him and it's not like anyone else. Who else has a sort of beat-laden string section? It's all about making people remember you. That's the mark of a great theme song. And I've got to say, Liger had it and Chapman's got it. So there you are. And I suppose the last one of these is when I think of Liger, I think of appealing to kids. You look at Liger's bodysuit, his most famous one. He has had dozens and dozens of these, ranging all kinds of colours for all different, sort of represent different parts of his personality or his character at different eras. But his most predominant one is white, red and gold. And particularly the white and red are the standout colours. It's bright, it's vibrant, he looks like a Power Ranger, and he's got this almost demonic mask. But because it's so bright and cheerful, you don't think, oh, that looks evil. You think, whoa, this guy looks awesome. He looks like an embodiment of energy and charisma. And that's so important to getting kids involved. So when I think of Liger and kid-friendly, the ones who immediately spring to mind from Riptide for me are Candy Floss, or Chuck Mambo, or Lion Kid. You know, as long as it's a suitable for all ages card, you need people like this on. You need them. You need to get the kids on board. You can't just have a dozen serious wrestlers on a serious wrestling show. Where's the variety? You know, if it's an all ages show, as some of the Riptide shows have been, like the Brighton Open Air Theatre, you know, or at the Brighton Youth Centre, the Pride of Brighton show, You need this thing for the kids to get involved and to love it as well. So Candy Floss, she's in shiny pink and blue. You know, she looks like a sweetie. Kids love sweeties. Chuck Mambo, he's coming out, he's in neon greens and yellows, he's high-fiving everyone. He's got beach balls. Who doesn't want to punch a beach ball? You've got Lion Kid, totally family friendly. You could leave your kids with him at Butlins and he'd probably entertain them all day. I don't know what he'd charge for that, but he could probably do it. This sort of energetic, fun element is such a part of wrestling. And I love technical wrestling. I love a serious match. You can give me one of those matches and they'll probably be my preferred match style, purely in terms of in-ring action, is to watch a Bret Hart or a Shibata or a Zack Sabre Jr. If I've had that all the time, I'd go crazy. I need the balance to appreciate it more. And that's when it's great to have a Lion Kid or a Candy Floss on a card. It's a whole different subset to just enjoy, just get on the crowd on board, feel the energy of the crowd and enjoy that. Another great example, when I think of Liger and I think of Kid Friendly, I think of Cassius. He's bright, he's neon, he's bouncing up and down, he's having a grand old time. He looks like he's having the time of his life. And that's before a match has even started. And it's that sort of thing. It's great. It gets a crowd involved, it gets kids involved. And when kids are involved, I think adult audiences feel it more as well. Don't get me wrong, that's not going to apply to all shows everywhere. I'm talking about family-friendly ones. So yeah, when I think of Liger and I think of Kid Friendly, I think that's a great thing. It's not what I want to watch 100% of the time, but I still enjoy them. I still get something out of it. And it's not just about me. It's about building up a new fan base. And it's about connecting to other people. And it's about swapping and sharing and having a show that's open for everyone. Someone will get something out of it. And I love that element of Liger, that he wins kids over. And those kids have grown to adults. And that's one of the reasons he's so beloved, retiring like 30 years on after a career that extreme. It's partly because the audience has grown with him. It's partly because of his talent and his skill and all the things I've mentioned. But it's partly just because the audience have grown with him and can appreciate that he's still doing it.
I suppose one thing, I didn't really treat it as a head-in, but one extra thing I would actually just like to add about Liger is that he's never been afraid to show a sense of humour out there. He had a big WWE match with Tyler Bate, and you can see straight away he's doing some comedy as soon as he gets in the ring and gets hold of Tyler's selfie stick. But that's actually quite typical for him, which is he's got that sort of Kurt Angle thing where he already knows he's successful, so he doesn't mind playing the fool, I suppose. Is a PWG match, which I wouldn't want to I wouldn't want to describe on here what happens, but there was many thumbs and many rectums. But Liger does it. He's never been afraid to be a bit of a cheeky chappy. There's this famous sort of clip where he's facing off against Big Van Vader, who's an absolute destroyer, the Brock Lesnar of his era in Japan. He's got this big steaming mastodon sort of helmet he puts on the floor, and all this steam comes flying out of it to terrify his opponents. And Liger just runs up and kicks it over and then runs off like a little schoolboy who knows he's pushed the bully too far. He's never been afraid to just sort of come across as a little bit silly. By having a sense of humour about yourself, even if you're a serious competitor, even if you're working incredibly hard at your craft, it can be a good thing. It can just let the fans know it's all right to enjoy the moment. And I was very lucky I've seen Liger wrestle a couple of times. But the one that really stands out to me is actually I got to see him face Marty Scurll. Scurll, of course, has a beard at Riptide when he fought Jimmy Havoc in a great little match. But I got to see Scurll versus Liger in London, and Scurll carried sort of an anti-Liger mask. It was a white villain mask with his own iconography all over it, but in the same shape as Liger's. And they proceeded to have a match, and there was lots of little comedy spots, but they treated it as a very competitive back and forth. But just seeing them both having fun and enjoying themselves really means it's one of my favourite matches I've ever seen. It was two of my favourites, having a good time, and so I had a good time. And so it's just great to see that sort of sense of humour shine through on the independent scene, you know, both of the stars of yesterday and the stars of today and the stars of tomorrow, hopefully.
Now, I suppose in summary, I'm not saying Liger is directly responsible for any of the talent I've listed. I'm not saying TK Cooper literally would never have learned high flying if he hadn't watched Jushin Liger. I'm not saying that Cassius wouldn't have worn bright colours if Liger hadn't done it. I'm not saying that Karen Noir wouldn't be a master of body language and mime if he hadn't studied Jushin Liger's matches, because that's patently not true. You can tell that Noir is his own person who's developed his own skill set. What I am saying is Liger is a great representative for so many different aspects of what makes wrestling great. So what Liger is a brilliant physical embodiment of what makes a successful wrestler, hence the length of his career, through the energy, through the magnetism, through the costume, through the moves, through changing his style completely, his physical performance levels, through his entrance music, through all of that. He is a great embodiment of that, but so is everyone you can see on the indies right now. Maybe they haven't mastered every single part of those yet because they're still growing. Or maybe they've focused on one particular element and really crafted it down. I'll let you be the judge on who's great at which elements and who needs to develop in what other elements. The idea that Liger can sum up what is so good about wrestling in many different ways, you can see parts of it in any wrestling company in the world, whether they're big like New Japan or whether they're proud independent scenes like Riptide. So I urge you to really just take a moment, put something on the video on demand service, mute it, and just watch what's going on. Really watch someone you like and appreciate every little element they've put into their performance. Because any wrestler out there who you enjoy, they have worked on something to win you over as an audience member. And of course it's interesting that, as I said at the start of this, Liger initially travelled the world building on his craft from different countries before going back and being given a gimmick and managing to knock it out of the park and make it extended to this massive world-conquering performance. Who's to say we're not seeing people like that now at Riptide? Chris Brooks is going to be spending 2020 in Japan. Chris Ridgway has been over there for most of 2019. You've got Kip Sabian, who had performed at Riptide, is now in AEW. Jimmy Havoc, of course. You've got Matt Riddle and Keith Lee, who both performed down here in WWE NXT. Take your pick of them. And that's one of the great things as well, isn't it, about watching indie wrestling, is you're seeing performers as they learn. You're seeing them get better each time, but you're also seeing an influx of new talent. You're seeing people move on and get new skills and travel the world and get bigger. You know, at some point, someone will have watched Liger at an all-star show in England and gone, hey, that Flying Yamada guy, he's not bad. I'd like to think that we can do the same at Riptide. Watch someone who's an up-and-comer, get behind them, or boo them, and just maybe one day you'll be able to look back and go, I was there when. Alright, well, I guess that's all I've got to say on this episode. I feel a little bit obsessive because from in my eye line right now I'm sort of at a diagonal point, and to my right is a Jushin Liger figure on the bookshelf I mentioned earlier. To the left is a Jushin Liger hat currently sitting on top of a guitar. So I feel like between those and this podcast recording, I feel like I should probably take a break. I should invest my time and sanity in something else. But honestly, I think I'm going to go put a Liger match on. Anyway, thanks for listening. I would say visit riptidewrestling.com, where you can buy all kinds of cool merch, but you can also get tickets for the next show, which is on the 14th of March in the Brighton Youth Centre. Already looking forward to that show immensely, and nothing's even been announced for it yet. That just tells you how much I want to get back to the action. So, thanks for joining. Hopefully I'll see you there. I'm just going to bow out, at least in my own head, walking off to Liger's theme tune. Da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da,